All right, we'll call the finance meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
Yep.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Carabelli, supported by Romano. Please vote. Well, I know it's going to pass. Let's just assume it. Okay, motion passes 10-0. Approval of the minutes dated August 29, 2018. Is there a motion? Moved by Kraft, supported by Lucido. Please vote. Motion passes 10-0. Public participation. Does anyone wish to be heard? Besides Andre, does anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none, we'll end public participation. We'll start with budget reviews, the finance department, and we'll bring up Director Smigel.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Before you start talking, let me go ahead and get the motion to receive and file. Moved by Gillette, supported by Carabelli. Okay, go ahead, thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon again. The Finance Department budget is on page 11 of your agenda. And we'll talk about three budgets in relation to the Finance Department. It'll be finance, purchasing, and equalization. And I'll introduce some folks as we go along. So in our office, in finance, our budget's about $2.4 million. We have 23 employees, not adding any for next year. As you'll recall, again, the board was kind enough to fund a new position in my office for this year and full-time, full blown for next year for a financial officer, which I'll talk about in a few minutes in terms of how that's going to assist us in trying to make this particular process a little more efficient. We have three folks in administration, which is myself, Steve Adair, who you know, my deputy, and Valerie, my administrative secretary. We have two folks in risk management, 14 people in the accounting and financial reporting function, two people in budget, which most of you know, Dave Steitler and Susie Caparucio. They're the budget folks, and two folks in payroll. So that makes up to 23 folks. Again, our budget's about $2.4 million. It's going up about 5.6% from last year, and three main causes there. One is the additional half a year for the financial officer position that we added in the middle of this year. You'll see a large percentage increase in the workers' comp, unemployment, and other. We talk over and over again about the compensated absences charge, and internal services is going up quite a bit because of the liability insurance chargeback increase. So in terms of dollars and cents, that's kind of what we do or what things look like. In terms of what we've done in the last year, I think probably the most significant thing we did in my office was we've been working with Public Works Commissioner's Office for the last several months to bring all the drainage board accounts and accounting onto the county's financial system. That's pretty much done, hoping to go live on October 1st, which is the start of the new fiscal year for all the drainage districts. That's been a very significant project and taken a lot of time, primarily for two of my folks. One of them is a fellow by the name of Tom Geschke. He's the other financial officer who's been here for a long time. And again, if you remember, the idea of adding a financial officer to the budget was he's going to retire in a year, so we need more help in that area anyway. He spent a lot of his time supporting the accounting system and assisting departments and doing troubleshooting, and works with equalization on apportionment report and a whole host of other things. But that was a major accomplishment to try to get that all on the books. The other thing we started this year, I want to expand on it next year, are these one-pagers we keep talking about, these little guys here. So that was something, again, that Steve Adair came up with. It's a great idea. What we want to do is expand on this and make these a little more, extended for next year, provide more information. What we're doing this year is we're basically putting these together the day of a budget hearing. kind of a thing. So we want to be able to get that on board and have that onboarded so we can have these to you more in advance for next year. So those are kind of our goals. The other major thing, we've talked about this in the past, in this last particular year, the Public Works project kind of got in the way. But what I want to do is work with our software vendor for the accounting system and work on an electronic or bringing the budgeting information online for the departments. So we've had this system in place for a number of years now where we send out Excel spreadsheets with historical spending. We kind of plop in the numbers we think are the numbers that should be in the budget. Departments fill in another column with their request, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little archaic, but it's going to take assistance from the software vendor and one of these financial officers to actually provide an online form, more or less, for the departments to fill out all this information, and it'll go right into the system. Then we have the ability to run more detailed reports in terms of what makes up supplies and services or contract services or whatever, information may be requested. So that's a major goal for next year. We want to go to a few more conferences. We haven't been to the National Governmental Finance Office Association conference, and I haven't been in a few years. I can't remember when the last time Steve was. We both want to go next year. There's a little money in there for that. And I think that concludes my comments on the finance office.
All right, Commissioners, I don't see any speakers. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Myjack.
Thank you. Yeah, computer's not working here. Thanks for coming here today, Steve. Just a question. I'm wondering if you can elaborate just a little bit more on, you talked about the drainage districts, and because there's a lot of commissioners that serve on drainage boards, okay, and I'm wondering, can you talk about, you said they're all going to be now online, so currently they're all paper?
No, they have their own computer system, so we're migrating the records and all the accounting onto the county's financial accounting system.
Okay.
So they've been on their own accounting system for a while, and what happens is when we're getting ready for the audit, they send over trial balances, and if we have any detailed questions, then we have to follow back up with Public Works, whereas this will enable us to drill down into detail and possibly answer the question on the spot without having to call back over. Maybe we don't get in touch with Bruce Manning and we have to wait because he's out or something along those lines.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that, Commissioners. Commissioner Carabelli?
Madam Chair. Couple of things for you. I like to hear that you're going to be going to conferences, you're going to learn best practices and keep moving forward and making the county better, especially in this aspect. I would also encourage and implore you to look at best practices not only at conferences, but take your team and go spend the day at Oakland, Wayne, Washtenaw, Monroe, Livingston, St. Clair, just to see what they're doing, how they're doing their reporting, how that's
I appreciate the input, Commissioner. I can tell you that Steve is very, very active in the Michigan Government Finance Officers Association. So every month they meet on the Auditing Standards Committee, for example. So he has contacts within state and local government from that organization as well. So point well taken.
And I understand going to committees and going to meetings, but I'm talking physically.
Right, but he can talk to those folks offline.
You talked about software and putting stuff up on the committees. Well, what are they using? How are they doing it? I'd like to see if we're doing something, and maybe we're the benchmark for everybody. Don't know.
Right.
But if we're not, we need to find out who that is, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and what's the outcome and the cost.
Right.
Right? So I'd like to see more of that. And it's not just a buzzword benchmarking, it's why reinvent the wheel if somebody's already doing it, and it's a compliment if we can copy what they're doing, because there's not a patent on it. So with that said, for one commissioner, when 2019 budget is either approved, disapproved, ratified, moved on, the day after that, I think the Board of Commissioners in your office should sit down and that next day and start working on the 2020 and what we want to do to see differently, how we want to build that mousetrap going forward to better it for everybody, for yourselves, for the board, for the understanding the process before we come up to try to jam everything into 10 meetings and try to digest everything at once, where we can literally kind of go through this systematically in a more timely manner, rather than trying to jam it all together. And everybody doesn't have the answers all at that last minute when we're trying to make decisions. So I'd like to see that process start the day after this budget is done. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but at least start that process the next day.
Digest it. I think we're talking before the meeting to get together with Jen and Crystal next week and talk about maybe how to provide more information to make it
Exactly.
easier. But, these one-pagers, a little more, kind of dashboard sort of things, I think would help.
And maybe it's on my end. Maybe it's that, maybe I got to keep better notes, or maybe we have to keep something a little bit different that I don't remember in June that we authorized a certain department to get a new position, and now here I am, we're amending it. Okay, well, what was this position? Because I can't remember, 6 months ago, unless I had that information in front of me of how we can kind of, and that's what I'm talking about, so we can kind of better track everything along the way instead of waiting till the last minute, here it all is. And again, I'm maybe not the same as everybody else. I can't remember all that.
Right.
So, and I don't know if it was amended, if it was something that was under a threshold you guys took upon yourselves to do within the rules, or is it something that I just forgot, or did we miss it? Not on purpose, maybe we missed it. But if we don't put these things in place and start on it before the next process, shame on us for not trying to get ahead of the game, if that makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Drollet?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks, Steve. First, thank you for doing these. I think these are helping.
All the credit goes to Steve, I think.
I said Steve.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for doing this. Obviously, the budget is a complicated process with a lot of factors that go in, and sometimes it's hard to zoom out and take a big picture look, and I think information like this helps us to do that. So I appreciate that. Along those lines, you mentioned that the budget in this particular department is going up, 5.1%, and you explained some of the reasons why. And on a lot of these sheets, some areas the budget is going up above CPI, some areas below, and so forth. I guess my big question is more of a broad budget question, if I could ask it, Madam Chair, and that is this. Is this a balanced budget in the sense that if we were starting over from zero, and we only had this year's revenues coming in 2019, would the budget being presented be covered by the revenues coming in for this year?
No. You'll see that we're drawing down in fund balance $5.6 or $5.7 million from primarily needs for capital.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got about a $13 million contribution to the capital plan in the budget.
Okay.
And so we have I can tell you in a minute.
While he's looking
So-
at that, commissioners, are you okay if that's receive and file is for all four of these? So we don't have to wait on the vote? Okay, thank you.
So the budget as it's presented shows a drawdown of fund balance of about 8.8 million. The 5.7 or 5.6 that I was referring to is, as I talked about in the overall budget presentation a couple of weeks ago in the forecast, we know we don't always spend all of our dollars, so we've got about a 5% I'll call it contingency or savings built in. So, I'm hoping.
But isn't that reflected in past budgets too, sort of?
Yeah, if you look at budget to actuals or
Budget to
actual
budgets.
results for the year, you'll see that we don't spend all of our money every year, but that each budget year stands on its own.
So are you saying the 5.1% is an increase from what we spent, not from what we budgeted last year?
In my office, it's budget to budget, amended budget in 18 to recommended budget in 19.
Okay, so
Not
it's
spending, but budgets.
it's the amended budget, not the spending,
Right.
to this year's
Right,
budget.
Exactly.
Okay, I guess just, zooming out, again, it concerns me a little bit because I know there's lots of reasons why the budgets are going up above the CPI in general. And I know there's lots of reasons why we're not balanced in the sense that we're spending more than we're taking in. But this is a good year. economically in the state of Michigan compared to many past years. And it worries me that if we're going to be spending above what we're taking in, now, where might that leave us if things, go south in a couple of years? Again, that's a zoom out question, Madam Chair, and I apologize for potentially not being specific to your budget. But I do want to compliment the work that you're doing. I think your department is doing a good job of making things clearer for us. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
So we're zooming back in, is what you're saying? Chair Smith.
Thanks, Chairwoman. Steve, just to piggyback on Commissioner Drolet's, it is a point worth noting that we are technically deficit spending for some years to come. I mean, we're drawing down, and I think the premise of that, from what I can surmise, is that we're drawing it down, but we're never getting below our general fund balance of, say, 20%, I think was what you showed, right? So
we get close, but we're not below.
We're getting close, but I mean, the theory of it is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's structurally sound. I don't know what all the technical details or the definitions are, but you are correct. We are spending down our savings in a good year, and it's worth noting. And at the same time, I mean, I think you guys see, at least what you can see, that should end at a certain point, and I don't have it in front of me, and taper off and come back. The only, I guess, concern that I have over that is things like yesterday when $400,000 of things we didn't plan come before us. And those are the things that I guess that just at some point hopefully will bump something else off the list, and you don't like to see that, but that's, right. I mean, really the only way, because we can't keep adding. I think that I'm sure the executive and you and we have a fairly solid idea of where we don't want that general fund to dip below. And that being said, though, you have to look at this for what it is. I mean, we're spending our savings, albeit to, catch up on capital projects, but I mean, it is what it is, right? That's it. And I agree with everybody, and you met Jen, and she said those little dashboards that Steve's come up with are very helpful in what we're doing here. So I want to talk to him. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonetti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. The dashboards are great. Thanks. Looking at your budget, looking at the revenue side, there's $500 in services. What do you guys do exactly to charge for $500 in services? And the year before, 2 years.
Charge emergency management for some grants.
Yeah.
I think. I'm not sure. Well, I guess garnishment fees. I guess I was thinking it might be in a different line item. So when creditors file garnishments, it's $6 a garnishment.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Yeah,
that
I
makes
was
sense.
thinking it might be under reimbursements, but that's it. We get a lot of garnishments. So.
Okay, I gotcha. All right. All righty. Thank you. Good seeing you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more speakers, so if you'd like to make the introduction on purchasing, go ahead.
Yeah, purchasing budget is on page 14 of your budget, and let me get there in my book if you work with me here. So the purchasing budget's about $1.5 million, 16 and a half folks in that department, several different operations, administration, print shop, mail services, central stores, and microfilm. The budget for 2019 is increasing by about 4.8%, which is all in labor, basically. If you'll recall, we added a mail services clerk to the budget midway through this year, so you have another half a year of that position being added to the full-time wage category. They really don't have much in the way of operating budget, so there's really not much going on there. As you all know, Polly retired earlier this summer, so we have a new purchasing manager. You may or may not know Larry Lee. He was with us before in purchasing, went to the treasurer's office for a year, and now we brought him back. And Jeff Dorowski is the assistant purchasing manager. So they're here to answer any more detailed questions you might have about purchasing. Again, not really much going on in purchasing, so, you know.
Commissioner Leonetti, was that from last time or?
No, this time.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I know, Steve, I don't think you can answer this one. Maybe you can. Come on up. I know we were talking about an auction person. You guys do some auctions over there, and there was an idea that we were going to get somebody that was going to, I guess, help raise revenue in a sense because they can auction off stuff. Is that still in the plans? Has that been implemented?
Actually, let me call Jeff up here.
Yeah.
Said I'm 2 weeks into the position.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good.
We were looking at doing online auctioning and having a person handle that, but it didn't work for a number of reasons, and so we went back to the live auction. We were a lot more successful with the live auction, and it's actually October 13th, so if any of you would like to come out to the warehouse and see how it runs, you are all invited to stop by and check it out. But we had a major dip in auction revenue when we did try and do it online.
Okay.
So we went back and we had a lot more success last year.
Okay, and when I look at your budget sheet, and this could be for maybe you, Steve, when we talk about revenue coming in, that's going to be primarily from your auction stuff, is that correct?
Primarily, yes.
Okay. All right, thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the same note, what line item is that in? I apologize. From the auctions?
The auction revenue is in other revenue, so you'll see in 2016,
Is that just the auction
I
stuff?
believe that's almost entirely.
And there's no other
Yeah.
revenues?
The other charges for services is from the print shop, chargebacks to departments for printing.
Okay. Being that, and again, I'm not an accountant, but being that it's just from auction and that's all it is, why do we call it other? Why don't we just say auction revenues? I mean, I'm just asking.
If we try to do that with a lot of.
You don't have to get into a lot
Yeah,
of things. It's
we,
just-
we could have a budget that has 50 line items in it, I guess.
I
So
just-
then it becomes less useful information in my mind if you have more line items and now you're, you know, microscopic print and a bunch of other things.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other speakers, so go ahead and move on to equalization.
So equalization is on page 18 of your agenda. And equalization is 10 folks, budget's only a little over $900,000. No new positions in equalization for 2019, haven't been any additions for a few years now. The budget is going up about 4.5%. 95% of the budget is labor in that department, so any changes in items such as fringe benefit chargebacks for compensated absences, same story, is gonna have a percentage increase effect that maybe seem larger than it normally would be. The full-time wage line item is going up 0.4%, so you've got new people coming on board and they aren't necessarily at maximum salary, and maybe they were, the people in the prior year were at maximum. But what I want to highlight is the full-time wage line item is right in line with what we would expect it to be. The increases or the cause of the increases in the whole department are basically in the workers' comp, or no, sorry, the compensated absences chargeback and the liability insurance chargeback. And again, since 95% of Kristen's budget is labor, any changes in the fringe benefit rates can have a larger impact percentage-wise than you might normally expect. So you all know Kristen Sheeloff, she's here to talk about any more details.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Just a couple of things. I am on board with all of you with this one pager. This is an excellent thing. I'm a picture person, and I like to see the pictures. It's real easy to see. And looking at that, the department labor by type, you know, one of the things that affects my department is the residential sales studies. It affects everybody throughout the county. And in the past years, that was just those tasks were performed by just clerical people, and I came before you to ask that those be a little bit more specialized. And so now I have all certified assessing technicians in those 3 clerical positions due to Renee retiring in January. So that is why our makeup is a little bit more on the professional side, assessment professional side, than it had been in the past. And along with that, those employees are responsible or required to take Con Ed. So that's why there's been some increases in the education and certification line items in my budget, because they have to do those things according to the State Tax Commission. I'm very pleased to let you all know that for the first time ever in Macomb County, we have a combined database that I was able to print reports from that matched the reports that I brought to you in April. That's never been done before, and that was through a collaborative effort with all of the local units who did what they were told to do and standardized property classes, parcel numbers, and all of the things that I had been kind of griping to you guys the past couple of years. So any efforts on your part to move them towards that process of standardization has worked. It also helped that I had that committee for the equalization directors, and so I was able to impress upon them the importance of that. We do have what's being referred to as MEG, the statewide Michigan Equalization Gateway reporting system that is in the works. It was supposed to be ready and up and running now, and it's not. And the people who are in charge of that are not quite sure when it will be ready, but it will eventually make reporting. We will stop doing everything on Excel spreadsheets and hand entering like I've been doing in the past, and we will just upload all of these reports to the state, and then they will be able to receive them. So we're getting there. We're just not quite there yet, but having this combined database will make that process a little bit more streamlined when it is up and running. Okay, so the big thing that is going to potentially affect equalization is on that major proposed changes section of the one-pager executive summary. For those of you that haven't heard, there is a House bill and a Senate bill out there that will that's discussing assessing reform. It's an assessing reform proposal, and it's got a lot of things in it that talks about changing the requirements for assessing units, for assessors, for county equalization. And there's some major potential impact for the county. Right now I have a staff of 10. If this proposed legislation goes through, I could become the assessor of record for some specific units that don't meet minimum standards as set by the state. There would be 11 of them. There's an opt-in, opt-out waiver that is a part of this legislation. And while I guess that's an okay thing for the local unit, it will become a budgeting nightmare for me because they give me 24 months advance notice. And so how am I supposed to create a budget not knowing if they're going to opt in, and then the day that I have to hire the staff to accommodate this new process of assessing at the county level is the same day that I'm going to be letting those people go, because I won't need them in 24 months. So it's going to be creating kind of a budget nightmare. Thank you, Lansing, for that. I am in contact with Marilyn Lane from the executive's office. She and I have been working pretty close to monitor these bills. It is progressing forward. There's been a bunch of meetings throughout the state, and maybe some of you have had the opportunity to attend some of those. I know they've talked about it at all levels, where this would be impactful. Worst case scenario is I become the assessor of record for all of the units in the county, because there's been a push for 30 years for county assessing, because Michigan is very different from most other states. We are one of the few that still have assessing procedures done at the local unit level, and if that were to occur, I would go from a staff of 10 to a staff of 90, and really not prepared for that. Yeah, it's I kind of like where I'm located right now, but it's physically impossible for me to be present in both places at all times. So we would all have to kind of be housed under one roof. which would involve some relocation. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. So it's coming, it's being talked about, it's not a done deal. Treasury thinks it's a done deal, but the assessing professionals throughout the state are doing everything in their power to maybe make it not such a done deal. So, pardon me?
Never mind.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. So, you know, it could change everything that I know to be true today. It could have absolutely zero effect. And I will never know until the file deadline for those waivers. So that's why my 2021 budgets don't show any change. They were prepared based on what I know to be true today. That could change in November.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, the charges for service, how many communities do you do now?
None.
You do,
Zero.
did the county at one time do one or two?
No.
Never?
We may have assisted in a reappraisal project because something happened where a roll was
But we
seized or
never,
something like
we
that.
never,
No, we are not in the business of assessing units at
okay,
all.
I understand that, but
Point of
then,
information, Commissioner Carabelli, the county did for many community, we went through a time where there's a spell where county was doing we were in the departments of many townships, clearing up problems that that were
Right.
created.
I
But we
remember
but we didn't solicit it, nor did we take them on under contract.
okay, well, years ago, I do remember the previous director, I do remember conversation of possibly
I was advocating that, yeah.
doing that,
He gave you guys a presentation back in either 2010 or 2011.
something about doing that at the county level.
Yeah.
And there was discussion, I just didn't know, and so I'm asking then the revenues for your service, charges, what was that for, the 3,500?
Oh, we have one company, Black Knight, that requests a copy of our entire database with names of property owners, addresses, that kind of stuff. So it's a download, a dump that we give them, and we charge them $3,500. I believe we actually had two companies request that same thing, so we might actually have $7,000 this year. But that's all that is. It's just a data dump of our sales and names and values.
I think that price should be going up year to year instead of being the same price. I mean, I don't know where you can get the same business done day per day, but, okay. The next thing is, you did say you were talking to Marilyn about this legislation. And it was
Absolutely.
brought up here at the town hall that we had, Chair Smith had here a month ago. One of the, either the state rep senators or one of their people were talking to us about that. So by hearing what you said, it doesn't sound like you're totally in favor of what they're looking to do.
I didn't leave Independence Township to come here to
Okay.
be.
So then,
I don't want to be an
the next
assessor.
question is, I know you said you were talking to Marilyn from the executive's office. Have you talked directly with the lobbyist GCSI to see if they're
No.
pushing for it?
No, everything that I would do would be through Marilyn. But anything that I get, any discussions or meetings that I attend, any documents that I have, I forward to her, and then she has been keeping them in the loop.
Okay. All right, that's what I had for right now. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Drollet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. Thank you very much for updating us on that potentially very significant impact. I just wanted to mention that on a couple of occasions I have the need to contact your office, and I wanted to say how much I appreciate how quickly you've been able to direct me and get me the information I needed. And I just wanted to let other commissioners know, if you contact Ms. Seeloft, she helps you quickly and you get what you need. I just want to make sure I acknowledge you publicly for that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Gillette. A couple of things. There is blowback on this legislation. I know MAC is very concerned about it. I think some of the smaller counties, it would be a huge hardship for them, and they have unique relationships with each other and how they deal with that in these smaller communities. So I'm not sure that the treasurer is correct that this is a done deal. Because a lot of the outlying counties are very concerned. If they're concerned, their legislators are concerned. The second thing is, I really appreciate you filling in all the benchmarks on this paperwork. Not everybody did that, so thank you for that. Commissioner Lucido.
Hi, do you know, I mean, you obviously we don't know what's to come, but if the state does pass this, are they picking up the cost of us going from 10 to 90 employees?
So the way it's being funded is there is something called the administration fee, and 2/3 of the units in the county do levy this admin fee, and it's a 1% admin fee on top of the tax bill. So if your total taxes were $100, you would pay 10% of that. 1/3 do not. So it could be a potential tax increase for those local units that don't, because that is what is being used to fund this. In addition to that, we wouldn't get the full 1%. We would get 80% of the 1%. And that's what somebody along the lines has determined is the proportionate share for the assessment services. For those of you who would be interested, I have analyzed all of that in a lovely one of these. I did not prepare that for you today, bring it for you today, but if anybody would like to see what I presented to the executive's office and to Steve Smeagol, I would be happy to forward that on to you, because it's a line by line. They start with, there's 3 minimum tests for this: certification level, 5,000 parcel threshold, and $12 million tax revenue. And that's great. So there's 11 units that don't meet that. There's also an additional test with this 80% of the 1% that I thought of, and Steve concurred, that once we get into the business of being open for business, for assessing, what if and this would never happen, but let's just say the city of Warren takes a look at their budget and says, 80% of the 1%, we could save $600,000 by having the county do the assessing. Okay, I've already thought of that. So now we're talking, instead of the 7 or 8 employees that I would have to hire to do those 11 units, I'd have to hire an additional 13 just to do Warren and Clinton and Chesterfield and Harrison Township. So all of those would be the additional units where their current budget is less than the 80% of the 1% that we would get to do this. I did bring up, there was a meeting a couple weeks ago in Novi where Nick Curry was present, and I did speak on behalf of Macomb County, asking the question, what problem are we trying to fix with this legislation? Because they talk about a lack of assessors. I mean, I didn't grow up saying I wanted to be a tax assessor, or nobody did. So nobody is coming into the profession. In my office, believe it or not, I am the 3rd youngest person in my office of 10. So, and I'm not going to get into my age, but I'm the 3rd youngest, trust me. So I am, the norm age for this profession. It's very difficult to bring young people in. So why on God's green earth would you write legislation that purposely displaces 275 people that are currently doing the job, doing it well, passing all of the AMAR reviews and everything that the State Tax Commission requires, simply because they only have a level 2 instead of a level 3? There's things like that don't make sense to me. And in the discussions with Maryland, we're trying to focus. We have 1 unit that falls under that. But, what are we trying to fix here? We have a lack of assessors. Why would you write legislation that specifically displaces people? Why, if we're not doing our jobs right, why we're only 1.5% of the entire rolls in the state of Michigan assumed by the State Tax Commission? I don't know about you guys, but 98.5% accuracy in my office is a win-win. That's awesome. So we're meeting the standards. You're not fixing a lack of assessor problem. What is the purpose of this legislation? And nobody can answer that. So that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. We would like to see that document that you have. I'm very interested in it. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Shift gears just a little bit. The economy and what's happening, how it's going really well in Macomb County as far as the dollars that are coming in. And not speaking of the Headley, but speaking of the new growth of not only residential, but the commercial, industrial, and everything that's happening. Also makes me a little nervous. There's a cycle, and depending on which economist you want to listen to, a 7-year or whatever with the auto company, and we haven't had that dip yet, and it's due. It's past due. And I know we try to be very conservative on going forth and what we want to project. And I know previously, the last few years, Steve, it had 2%, and Steve, we bumped that up to 3.5. That's a lot, and I'm nervous about that, because when you forecast that, you spend that, and we're all
Right.
talking about the budgets being balanced, and jumping from 2 to 3.5 is a big jump, in my opinion. And I see that probably sustaining for next year. After that, I don't know, and I've listened to a lot of different economic people. I know it's real money out there, not just the banks. They came in late to the game, so it's probably a little bit safer, or it's a lot safer than what it was before the crash. But do you feel comfortable jumping that high at 3.5 and then continuing that?
Yeah, because I kind of kept him at bay with the 2% for the past couple years. When the CPI was hovering around 1, you know, hoping for growth of 1%, that's how we hit the 2. You know, last year CPI was 2. We're looking at around 2 again. We have lots of residential construction going on, and again, because we are primarily a residential-based county, you know, it's a good sign. There's a lot of building going on in Macomb. Macomb Township has just been an explosion. They are actually higher in SEV than Warren, and there are many, many spaces yet to build subdivisions in, and I think, you know, as fast as they can put them in there, they are. So anywhere from 2 to probably 4 would be a comfortable number. We've got some big construction going on in Shelby with Amazon. We've got some projects in the works, you know, that can support that. So I'm comfortable. How long will it last? I don't know. You know,
I guess that's
it's
my
hard to
concern as
forecast
well,
it. And with the legislators, you know, every day there's a new exemption that comes out that we have to deal with. You know, we're still on that slow scale of getting rid of the personal property. Now they've thrown utility in there. So the utility stuff that we have now is safe, but anything future installed will not be assessed. So I could see people ripping out the old, putting in the new, and calling it a done day, you know, a done deal. So, you know, it's tricky at this point because they keep adding the exemptions. You know, maybe they can cool it for a little bit, and we won't be. We refer to ourselves as exemption assessors because that's primarily what we spend a lot of our time on is trying to track and deal with all these exemptions. You know, but the residential base is doing good. You know, it is doing good, and we're actually seeing some pretty decent increases. We're not quite done tweaking our studies for commercial or industrial yet, but we are seeing some growth there too. You know, so I think it can be supported.
And just one last thing to share with you, and you probably already know this, is when they say single-family starts, home starts, unfortunately, these senior centers are being classified differently than a regular apartment. And that may skew your numbers a little bit. So I would take a deep look at how SEMCOG and these other reporting agencies are classifying certain things.
Okay.
Because I don't think that it's not being done right. And I think it may skew, not a large number, but there's more of these going in right now than anything else.
So you're talking about the PILTs, or PILT-type properties,
Yes.
the payment in lieu? Yeah.
So I would take a close look at that in the future because I think those numbers are off big time.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll, I don't have any more speakers. Thank you. So we'll go to non-departmental operating transfers. Director Smiko?
That's your stuff? Okay, non-departmental. So of course, non-departmental is where we house all the revenues and expenses that are general in nature, not really assigned just to any particular department, such as property taxes, liquor tax, revenue sharing, personal property tax reimbursement, interest and earnings on the cash pool, those sorts of things. So if everyone is with me on, where does it start? On page 22 of your agenda. Again, we just spoke about property taxes. So we got a 3% or 3.5% increase built into the 19 budget for property taxes. We're winding that down each year from 3.5 to 3 to 2.5 and then 2, which at some point would, the idea would be, you know, you've got some growth, but you have mostly inflation at some point, but we, as Kristen was indicating, still see a kind of a strong market for the next couple of years. And again, that 3.5 was based on residential new construction only, so we've got some commercial coming on as well. So again, kind of building that comfort level that 3.5 is a good number for next year and hopefully carrying forward for a couple of years. But I guess the point is we're winding that down so we don't have that projected out too awful long. Intergovernmental line item is about $29 million. That's made up primarily of 3 items. There's $6 million in there for personal property tax reimbursement, $16 million for revenue sharing, and $6 million for liquor tax. We'll see when we talk about transfers out. We're required by law to transfer 50% of our liquor tax collections to substance abuse. So you'll see a transfer for a little over $3 million, $3.1 million for the transfer out. The charges for services line item is primarily made up of real estate transfer tax. So we bumped that a little bit, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, to about $4.2 million for 2019. Investment income, that's a somewhat small amount in terms of the overall budget, $600,000. We're basically doubling that based on our returns from last year and the kinds of investments that the Treasurer's Office is engaging in now. The indirect cost allocation plan, we've talked about that ad nauseum, it seems, over time. So that revenue is based on a new plan. Down in the expenditure area, all of the negative numbers represent the turnover factor and the associated fringe benefits on that turnover factor. Again, we lowered that from 5% to 3.5%, so that's why you're going to see the negative number becoming smaller. There's an additional cost built into the budget, assuming that departments are going to fill their vacant positions more rapidly than they have in the past. If we're lucky, we'll come in at 4% or something, and that means we saved 0.5% of payroll, which is about $500,000 or $600,000. The next major line item is going to be supplies and services. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's more detail a couple of pages over. That's about $1.3 million, and it's going down $300,000, and we'll talk about, there's one specific item that's causing that. And then capital outlay. Most of what's in capital outlay is vehicle purchases, but there's also money in there for furniture. So people want to replace old furniture, or that kind of thing. So most of that money, about I'm going to say it's about $900,000 at least, or $1 million, are for vehicles, and there's a significant increase in that budget of about $360,000 for the first year, for 1 year in the Sheriff's Department. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. The Sheriff's Department has a replacement plan on their vehicles. In 2019, there's a spike in vehicles to about 30. Normally, they replace about 20 a year. It costs about $30,000 a vehicle for a police vehicle. Not all of them, I believe, are police vehicles. There's some transport vans, but for patrol cars, it's about $30,000 a vehicle. So 30 of those is $900,000 for a year. The plan calls for back to the 20 level for a couple of years. We'll probably see a spike depending on how every 3 or 4 years, depending on how they use them. A patrol vehicle lasts somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 years, 2.5 maybe, depending on how it's driven and the miles and all that sort of thing. The sheriff can talk about that in more detail, but of course, it's not just miles being driven. You've got hours on the motor, sort of like a boat. So if they're on a traffic stop, the engine's running, so on and so forth. So, so that's really what's going on in capital outlay. If you want any more questions on this particular page, or you want me to just continue on with 2 pages over with the appropriations?
Chair Smith.
Thanks. Thank you. Steve, you mentioned $3 million or some number close to that transferred out for substance abuse. Where does that go? I mean, I don't, who do we transfer that out to?
We transfer that to Randy O'Brien's operation over at Mental Health. It's actually to the Substance Abuse Fund. When we
Okay.
talk about their budget a week from Monday,
Okay.
you'll see that.
That'll
and-
come in,
And we
and then-
have to do 50%. They can spend it, on, substance abuse programs. If they don't spend it, it rolls over into fund balance.
Okay,
But we're required by Public Act 2 to provide 50%.
got it. Thank you.
Do you want to ask now, Commissioner Carabelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I told you that's debatable, that it doesn't have to just go to that the sheriff can use it for their counselors of diverting at the jail. If they're on drugs, it's also something to do with substance abuse where they can go in and get counseling at that time. Those funds, the county really needs to take a look at it. I did some research and gave it to you guys to take a look at that, and it kind of fell off to the wayside. So those funds can be used in other aspects as long as it's to do with drug or alcohol.
Substance abuse, yeah.
Okay. I got to ask a couple questions. We have purchasing sitting here. What is our policy and who sets it? So on a vehicle, what is it? No, not us. No, let me finish the question. Who says how much we're going to spend on a vehicle? What type of vehicle? Who makes that determination?
Usually it's worked with purchasing and the department head requesting the vehicle. Most of those vehicles are going to be sheriff vehicles, which there's certain parameters and certain standards.
I understand that. And then at one time, there was a certain mileage. We said at this point, we're going to be turning these vehicles over. And we were taking care of them ourselves. We had the garage, and then we started taking care of other vehicles. And I don't even know where we're at, if we're still servicing all the county-owned vehicles by the garage.
Most of the vehicles for most purposes are being serviced at the roads.
Okay. So what that said, best practices, again, it came time, we were in financial trouble here at the county. We needed to really tighten our belt. We were saying, okay, emergency vehicles come off the road at X amount of miles, they're still safe to drive. We were selling those to other departments for use, rather than buying new vehicles for something else. And obviously, times are good. We don't need to worry about that anymore. Well, I don't believe in that. I believe if it's good during bad times, it should be good during good times. It's the people's money, not our money. So when I look at stuff like this, I look at non-governmental business. A lot of them have the opportunity to depreciate. Okay, they get to write some of the stuff, fleets of vehicles and different things on their taxes. Well, I don't know, I don't think we have that availability. So with that said, it makes sense sometimes to lease vehicles. It makes a lot of sense for dollars and cents, a lot of sense for maintenance. But I guess my question is, who looks at that in the county? Is it purchasing?
It'll
Is
come
it-
under purchasing.
well,
I
is
mean,
it
working with my
finance?
office, but purchasing.
My point is that there's so many different programs out there that I just seen a private business presentation on how we're foolish not to be leasing these vehicles, and they're putting numbers together, and it blew me away in how much money could be saved. So I guess my point is that the process, when I said who authorized the vehicle, if it's a department head and purchasing, okay, what parameters are set that they're following? So I guess I implore both purchasing and your office to get together and take a look at these other programs that are out there, because it cuts a lot of costs, especially if they're going to take care of the vehicle and you don't have no service with them. So I just ask you to take a look at that. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any other speakers if you want to continue.
So I will go over, flip 2 pages to, I'm not sure what page it is on your agenda, I guess page 24. This is the appropriations area, so this is pretty much where all of our countywide memberships and dues and those sorts of things are in there. So you'll see items on here every year for SEMCOG and NACO and MAC, 8 Mile Boulevard Association, Detroit Regional Chamber. Most of those things are static year to year. And aren't really changing a whole lot. What you will see down in the lower section of, or portion of that schedule would be the county at-large drain. So you'll recall a year ago, Public Works Commissioner Miller was here and wanted to reinstitute that program where we would have a 50-50 match with local units that are requesting drain cleanout. So there's a $150,000 appropriation for 2018. She has requested that we increase that to $200,000 for next year. the county match on
Can
that
I
is
have,
100,000.
can I have you pause for just
Sure.
a second? For commissioners that don't have that in their packet, it's page C67 of the budget. It's also on the iPad, but it appears to be missing in the packet. C67 in the budget? Right, that's the budget page number that you're looking at on the iPad. It's on the iPad, it's just not in our packet. Okay, sorry about that, Steve.
Okay, no problem. So again, Commissioner Miller has requested $200,000. $100,000 of that would be charged back to the local units. That flows into the charges for services line item back 2 pages prior in the revenue section. So an additional $50,000 appropriation being requested there, and I'm sure Commissioner Miller can talk in far greater detail when she is here to talk about her budget, and commissioners that serve on the various drainage boards probably know more and what's going on in there. There's we've taken the State Forensic Center budget out, that we no longer pay that. That's paid by mental health. So that's when folks are found guilty by reason of insanity, basically, and they're sent to a forensic center for evaluation. And they stay there until they're evaluated on a periodic basis, and if they're ever deemed suitable for society, then we don't pay that anymore, but we're paying 10% of that cost, I believe. But that, in 2017, mental health started paying for that. So we took it out of the budget for 2019. So that's the appropriations area. And then if we flip back a page, this is all the transfers that the general fund makes to various programs. And the revenue that you'll see in that particular department is almost entirely made up of an $8 million transfer from the delinquent tax revolving fund that has been happening and built into our budget for decades. You'll see that this particular section of the budget is increasing quite substantially, but it's basically due to 2 or 3 line items. The capital improvement fund contribution, again, we've built in a contribution of $13.5 million based on the capital plan as we know it today. We've only got $1.2 million that we've come to you with this year in terms of projects. We're just trying to put a placeholder in the budget so we know and don't have a budget that reflects a surplus when there's not. Don't really expect a surplus. The debt service fund, the contribution to that fund is going down $1.5 million. That's because a year ago we're not putting in a debt or a new debt bond issue for capital projects. So a year ago we had $1.5 million built in for debt service on a capital projects issue. We're not in need of doing that, so there's the reduction there. The MIDC fund, we've talked about that numerous times. That's a new fund. And then we talked somewhat on Monday about the Juvenile Justice Center and the reduction of about $1 million in the contribution as we've put in a turnover factor to try to kind of budget for what we think is going to be more closely to actual payroll based on the number of kids that are. We talked about that on Monday.
Commissioner Carabelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm asking this. These separate things that you have here, 8 Mile Boulevard Association, I see some of these associations. Why aren't these attributed to specific departments?
I guess they're considered countywide. So MAC is a countywide, and or NACO.
Well, I just gave you the example, 8 Mile Boulevard Association. That's not countywide, is it? I'm asking the question.
I guess you could put it in the board office.
Would it be the board office? Would it be planning, executive's office? I'm just kind of, what I told you before, I go look at all these different things. They're all in different places. You don't know what a true cost for that department is. And it's really hard for me to try to grab this stuff and say, what does this belong to?
But I guess I don't want to argue, but if you have NACO membership, is that benefiting one department or all departments across the county, for example? maybe it's a philosophical discussion more than anything, but it's been, you know,
Like turning point. I'm just pulling stuff off. Stream gauge. Stream gauge, I guess, is the drain off. Pardon me? Stream gauge is?
Okay, behave yourself.
I'm guessing it's for the drain office.
Typically it is public, well, it's through DEQ now, but yeah.
Okay, stream gauge is, you know, $86,000. Does the county-wide benefit? Yes, but it's a department that handles. Okay, I guess we can talk offline on how these things should go in there. Let me ask you one question, because I don't know if you passed over it or if you're leading into it. So the difference from what we projected on the equalization coming into the, in 2018, the difference from what it actually came in at that we're gonna have the overflow difference is how much?
Yeah. We budgeted 2%, I think, or 2.5 for 18.
2.
I think it was 2, so it's 1.5 points, so $1.8 million.
So you got
roughly.
just $1.8 million difference from what we budgeted? Okay. Years past, we used to take that and we used to pay off the pension. We used to make extra payments towards the retirement healthcare. We've taken it in the past, and we've done that. We've said
Many years ago, yeah.
Okay, what is is that just getting rolled into the general fund, or what are you doing with that different cash? Is that on
It's
here?
rolling, at this point, rolling into the fund balance.
So you're taking the difference and it's going directly into the general fund balance, and that's already included in the 2019 budget as in the general fund
Right.
balance.
And I'll also say that that's then available to pay for capital projects every year. So as it compounds, it's leading to no longer needing to bond for capital projects. It's not necessarily earmarked, but it's providing enough revenue overall to be able to fund capital projects without
And
bonding.
Steve, I'm one commissioner, but I'll tell you what, if you wanted to do a separate line item for capital projects with that amount, knowing that that's what you have coming in, and you wanted to do and save for certain things or do, I think that'd be the best thing here for the county. But to throw it in the general fund, and in your mind, you're earmarking it towards, future capital project, that's all up in your head. It's not on a piece of paper showing us, or maybe what your boss are telling you they're gonna do with it, but it's not telling us at a line of this $1.8 million. The previous year, I think it was a lot more than that. Wasn't it like three.
I can't remember the
But the
prior
point
year,
is,
but it was.
that's funds coming in that kind of don't hit the books as far as us seeing this as a line item of how much the difference is, correct?
I would say it hits the book, so you can see budget to actual on
But
revenues.
it's not explained. There's not a footnote saying, hey, this $1.8 million is from the difference from actual and projected. We can talk offline
Yeah.
about that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chair Smith?
Thanks, thank you. Steve, two questions. One, and I don't remember, I'm sure you've talked about it before, but professional development initiative.
That's basically management training and other staff training that HR puts on countywide for all departments.
Okay,
So there's like a 6-day program or six sessions
right. So it's
on
an
the
HR
diversity and
program.
labor law and.
Right. But it's an HR program, but
It's
since
an
it
HR that's-
touches everybody, it's, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my other question, based on the big picture is, I know that the DTRF fund has been donating, I don't know the right word, but, giving, I guess, $8 million to the budget for the general fund for, do you know how many years?
As long as I've been here. So at least 30, well,
30
28.
years. 30 years, they've been given $8 million a year, or is it just?
6 to 8, and it's
Really?
been in the neighborhood of 8 for
Okay.
10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Long time.
Got it. That's what I wanted to know. I didn't know if it was more recent
Oh, no,
or
no,
if
no.
it's been going
No,
on
it's been there
and
for a
sustained
long
for.
time.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Kraft?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve, I'm going to hop around the appropriations page a little bit, so bear with me. The first one is the State Forensic Evaluation Center. Where does that money come from? Is that money that comes down from the state and then comes to the county, and then we were paying for that, but now CMH is taking it over? How is that funded?
So we were being billed by the state of Michigan for the cost of housing folks in a state facility.
Okay. For the entirety?
For the, yeah.
For our dollar
As long
amount,
as-
is the full dollar amount?
No, I think
We're
it's
not
10%.
10%?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only 10%.
Okay. And then moving up one line to the county bicentennial, I was under the impression that those were donations and it was covered and it wasn't all $80,000 from our budget.
There is, that's gonna be up in the revenue, probably under.
Is it up in the revenue?
It's probably under other revenue, so if you'll see in 2000, the budget at least, was 73,500, most of that I think is gonna be for the bicentennial, yeah.
Okay. And then,
As far as I know, we've collected more than 80,000.
okay.
I don't know what we spent.
That's,
but
yeah, just sort of set me back on when I thought we had
Yep.
that covered.
Yep,
Okay.
we did. We
Last
do.
question for you, Steve, for one Macomb. Why is it, do you know why it's doubling from?
So what we did was the executive's office is requested to appropriate more money for diversity type programs through One Macomb. You'll see about five line items up, literacy program.
Mhm.
The literacy program is going away. So we took some of that money and increased the appropriation to One Macomb, and I think there's about $11,000 savings there.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Gillette?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve, on those appropriations for outside agencies and associations, are those sort of like contracts we have these organizations? Do they come before a vote of the commission? You just mentioned that.
They're usually memberships of some sort. We get a bill from them once a year.
But when did we decide to join them? And you just mentioned that
Most
we're
of these-
dropping literacy and we're putting more into
Well,
One
the literacy
Macomb.
program went just out of business. I can't remember who ran it, but it dried up.
Right. So who makes a decision to where to put that money? I mean, now it's going to One Macomb. Did we decide that? Who decided to say, put it into One Macomb
Executive's
instead of
office
8?
makes that decision, and then we present it as a recommendation.
Okay,
to
so
you.
that's those recommendations for these agencies is part of the budget. So if we approve the budget, essentially we're approving of those recommendations.
I would say that's an accurate representation. And we've had most of these line items in the budget, again, ever since I've been here.
Yeah, that's why.
Long time. Now, who would, back then, it was pre-executive form, so the Board of
Right.
Commissioners, I'm sure, at some point in time, decades ago, decided that these organizations were beneficial to belong to, and we've just kind of continued that.
I wonder if we should kind of review that at some point rather than just continuing with historic, what somebody decided 30 years ago. It seems a little odd, that some decades ago, somebody decided they wanted to give money to the 8 Mile Association instead of the 16 Mile Association or something, or whenever that decision was made, and we just continually renew it without any sort of board input of any sort, and the only input is coming from the executive office, which might be good input, but maybe One Macomb is not the place to put the additional money. Maybe that additional money better belongs with a Turning Point or something. I don't know. But it seems like, as a board, we should have a little bit more input into that than just finding out what groups we're joining from who joined decades ago, and then finding out that the executive wants to give more money to one group that he likes more than another group for whatever reasons that we don't understand. So that's just a broader point, but I appreciate you explaining where that comes from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I was going to speak, I sort of have the same question. Now, I don't have the sheet up because I have the thing so I know who to call and when to call them. But I was looking at it before I came in today. Some of them are organizations and some of them are charities, correct?
There's a couple of charities that we have contracts with. Turning Point for the nurse, the SANE is a contract for nursing services, I believe.
Okay, and Care House?
Yeah, there's a contract for that too. I don't know the nature of it, but we do have contracts with those folks, as far as I know.
We have contracts to receive services from them?
As far as I know.
Okay, I'm going to let Commissioner Brown answer that. Go ahead.
Yes, we have contract with Care House for counseling services. That's how we provide the money. The county can't just give money to charity
Right.
for no reason.
Exactly.
We have to receive something of value.
Right.
And it's been determined that they do provide counseling services to us, period.
Okay, thank you. That's where I was going with this.
Right,
was
exactly.
why are we can on CDBG funds, like cities can give to charities on CDBG funds, and when I saw this, that's what I was wondering. Thank you. Commissioner Lucido.
Hi, hi Steve. I'm looking at the Library for the Blind, and obviously I support a library for the blind, but when I was on the board at Macomb Community College, I thought that they support now a library for the blind through the college. Do you know if that's accessible to everybody?
I don't know. We have a specific contract with that as well.
Okay.
We can look into that. and get
I just
back with
think
you.
we're kind of double dipping if they do have access to one that Macomb already, that the college that's
This
right
is through
here.
the Clinton Macomb. That's correct. This is through Clinton Macomb Public Library.
Okay.
That's our contract
Okay.
with this.
I think the college might provide one.
Yeah, yeah, we've had this contract for a few years now, but it's with Clinton Macomb.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, Commissioner Carabelli, you already spoke on this, didn't you? Did you speak yet, Chair? Okay, can he go first since it's Chair Smith?
Thank you. Steve, two questions. One was just brought to me. Why did the literacy program end? Do you know? Do you have any idea?
You know, I'll have to follow up with you, Commissioner. I was told at one point in time, I can't remember.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
It's just,
I can follow up. Pam Lavers knows, so I can follow up with you.
and then just to carry on with Commissioner Drolette's conversation, whose decision is this, and we've never, as a board, really put across our preferences and our wishes as far as what we want to fund in a budget, like these type of items like this. So when you say who's done it, Steve says, a lot of these have been going on for years from the prior boards, right? Before the executive. The executive looks like he's kept most of them, but I don't think as a board we've ever, got together and said, these are our priorities, could you add these to the budget? So I guess when you say whose responsibility is it, generally speaking, in a lot of places, it's a legislative priority that you would act on, to try to get that type of thing in the budget. At the same time, I don't think we've ever done that, so it's the executive that puts this in, and we basically say, yeah, these look good. So, I just want to point out to you that, there might be some theory and there's theories out there that it's our responsibility too to add, some priorities to this, but if we don't give them any priorities, then we don't get any. You know what I'm saying, right? And
May I respond, Madam Chair, very briefly?
Very
briefly. I would wonder if it would be appropriate to develop a board policy, similarly we did with our contracting or approving of contracts, because these are decisions made that are policy decisions and funding decisions that are being made as to which outside group is going to get money and which one's not. And I think that as a policy-making body and a budget-making body, we should have some input into that. So I would hope that we would look then at developing a policy specific to this issue. Thank you.
Okay.
I would say that'd be more of a next year type of an issue than a this year, but
I can write the policy this week and have it done by a full board.
Okay, got it. Okay, and before I call Commissioner Carabelli, we're talking about giving money, and they just said that these are services we're receiving. We're not allowed to just give money out. Commissioner Carabelli.
If I can follow up on
Point of
Commissioner's-
information, before I go on my question,
Well-
they do give money, CDBG funds, the county does receive.
Yes.
They do have the right to give those out to certain things.
Yes, I think that was different than what's on this page, but you're
I
right.
couldn't tell you because I don't understand it.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Carabelli.
So let me follow up on what I
Now I'm gonna forget.
believe I remember about the literacy program, and I'll still follow up with Pam, but the money that was in our budget was $32,800. That did not fund 100% of their operation. They got outside funding, and I can't remember where that funding came from. That funding went away, and our funding was not enough to. Yeah, and it wasn't enough for them to our contribution was then not enough for them to continue their operation. I'll follow up with you on more detail, but general nature.
Thank you. And Commissioner Smith had asked a couple of the questions that I was going to ask. So Crystal, if you can make sure that Steve does follow up with the literacy program. And I would like for you to also follow up with us on the Library for the Blind, because I say that I know for a fact that Shelby Township takes CDBG funds and they use those for buying material for the blind. I know for a fact that Macomb Clinton Library does the same thing. I know for a fact that the Romeo Washington all have these sections for the blind. They provide these with the communities and the dollars that they receive. So for us to be doing this, if it's with one particular community, I think I have an issue with that. I don't understand it enough, so if you can get back with us on that and get it with Crystal, I would appreciate that. And that leads into the next question. Where would the library Macomb County has that we, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Brown can correct me, we let it to Wayne State, they rent it from us, and they have either operate a library there at Macomb Community College, or they operate something out of there, and we receive something back. Where is that on the books?
In terms of what we receive back?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we.
That used to be on our books, I believe, the
We had a
library
fund.
there, and then Wayne State took that over, and that was off our books years ago.
Okay, let me make it really clear.
Sure.
We own that property. We never redeeded it to anybody. We did not sell it.
No, I think we rent it for $1 a year, I think.
I respectfully disagree with you. The county of Macomb
Yeah, we know-
owns
to my
that
knowledge, we did
facility
not deed
and the
that.
property.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, we have a whole lot of people
Anyway.
talking right now, so why don't,
I'll
I
get your
think there
answer.
needs to be some research regarding that.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's not in our budget. I think we'll have our staff look into that. You still want the floor, Commissioner Carabelli? Okay, thank you. All right, and my last thing is, these aren't CDBG funds.
No.
The rationale for these is we're contracting for something.
For some of the non-government, quasi-governmental agencies or memberships. So, the Turning Point,
Right, memberships,
Care House.
right,
Yeah, so
okay.
memberships to
Okay.
NACO, MAC, SEMCOG, those are all kind of membership-related.
Okay, so we have CDBG funds like the cities do, right, to give out to charities. Do we have CDBG funds that work the same way?
We have CDBG funds in community action, yeah. I don't know if we use them nor, I mean, individually, but we do get some money for CDBG.
So generally speaking, CDBG funds, if you're giving them like to a charity, doesn't that usually fall on the legislative body to make the decision as to where the CDBG funds are spent?
Community action comes to the board with a master plan for the CDBG, and it spells out where we're spending, where they intend on allocating the money and for what purpose, if I remember correctly.
Point of information.
It used to be bricks and mortar, it's not so much
Years
anymore.
past, it used to go to the planning department, and Don Morandini was the one who administrated it for the county through the planning department. I believe that's where he
Right.
worked. I believe it still may go to that because they have to do the oversight and investigation in each community.
No,
Well,
that's
okay.
with Ernest over in community action.
Well,
Okay, they may have
okay. Do other counties' legislative bodies make those decisions? I know that the cities do. The
I don't-
cities, it's the legislative bodies that go through the CDBG
Yeah.
funds, go through all of the applications from the charities and everything, and they make the decision. Administration doesn't make that decision. Do other counties do it?
I couldn't tell you what other counties do. I'm gonna say it's part of the master plan, but I'll put that on my list of things to follow up with.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you for recognizing me for the 30th time. Just very quickly on that point, I don't believe it's correct to phrase this that we're donating these to charities. I don't believe we have the authority to decide to donate things to charity. I think these may be contracting for services in some capacity. I had a conversation with John Chapka just a couple days ago in which he said we don't donate to charities as a governmental organization. So there may be some gray area that I would like some clarification.
CDBG funds are that gray area. Yes, generally speaking, you're right.
So if these are contract for services, assume we have a contract with like One Macomb that shows what we're getting for doubling their money. So I'd like to look at that contract, the last one and the new one that we've apparently signed, if it's a contract, so I can see the additional double value
One
that we're
Macomb's
getting.
an
under it.
internal operation. It's making contributions and diversity efforts, spending money on diversity efforts. So we don't have there's not a One Macomb organization, as far as I know.
There's not. This says outside
Yeah.
organizations and associations.
There's a
So it shouldn't be under outside agencies and associations.
yeah. There's the one Macomb Foundation, I guess, but that's.
All right.
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah, I mean,
you know.
is it an outside organization?
It's not part of the, if it's not part of the county.
Okay. See, I don't expect you to know every detail of every department. You're doing an amazingly good job at handling the budget stuff. Amazingly good job. So I appreciate that. But, you know, this area does a little bit concern me as to what the process is, what the oversight is, how the decision-making is being made, and what the law is in regard to it. So I hope we do some, you know, very quick follow-up on that. And I understand that you, again, don't know every detail about every organization. You're just following the budget, so I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Duche?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. There's talking about CDBG. If I'm not mistaken, CDBG funds have to be accounted for with the federal government, and it's not just give it here or give it there. There's a whole bunch of regulations that come in with the funding, because the cities have CDBG and the county has CDBG, and I believe it was going through planning. But to say that it's a donation to a charitable organization from CDBG is I think, very, very far from the truth, first of all. And
I mean, I've actually participated in this process at the city level. Maybe administration vets who's eligible, but it's the legislative body that decides who gets it.
Well, and how it's spent has to be reported pretty closely. But that being said, these organizations that are on this list, if I'm not mistaken, are given up by the county Office of County Executive. So if you have a problem with who's on the list, or you want to add somebody to the list, my suggestion would be go to talk to the Office of County Executive, because he's the individual giving us the budget. Bottom line. You might not agree with it, but that's what it is.
This isn't CDBG. That's not what's in front of us. I just wanted to know where it was in the budget. That's
Okay.
all. And who handles it in other counties, and I'll find that out myself.
Very good. Thank you.
I see no other speakers. We have a motion and support. Please vote. Motion passes 13-0. Thank you. Okay, Health and Human Services Committee recommendation. Is there a motion? Moved by Duge, supported by Leonetti. Please vote. I should have had that today. Motion passes 13-0. Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee recommendations. Moved by Brown, supported by Romano. Please vote. Yeah, because this is finance, yeah. I didn't have a window pop up. Apparently we all voted for it.
We're all fans. Russians are hacking in, spoiling our elections.
Okay. Good. Motion passes 13-0. Government Operations Committee recommendations. Moved by Kraft, supported by Lucido. Please vote. Motion passes 13-0. All right, proclamations commending Peter Provenzano. Do we want to do these all at once or individually? All at once. Motion to approve A, B, and C. Moved by Drollet, supported by Duge. Please vote. You do? Okay. All right, motion passes 13-0. New business. Chair Smith.
Thank you. Today was the grand opening for the Goldenberry Adult Daycare Center at the Verkulen Building. They renovated the whole area and did some really nice things over there. They had a ribbon cutting. They had us over for lunch. And Patty has just a couple little quick slides that I think will show up on your iPad here. It was a nice event, and they've really changed this building over. So, Leon, you'll like it one day. Well, I'm sorry, what? It's at the Verkulen Building.
Okay, anyone else with new business?
Well,
All right, public participation. Does anyone
That
wish
was
to
us.
be heard? Does
The man
anyone-
on the right was really, really happy to be
Yeah.
there.
All right, seeing none, we'll close public participation. Motion to adjourn, moved by Duje, supported by Drollet. Please vote.
Yeah, relax. They're showing the pictures.
Bob
from-
won it.
Oh,
Kerplunk.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. What's that? Look at that.
Yeah. Well, this picture is of the
This was
Patrick
me,
Johnson,
Mark,
who is the
and
board chair.
Kevin.
No one cares.
The picture.
It is, it will be anyway.
Yes,
Anyway.
unfortunately, way too soon.
You're welcome.
That's it. You gotta look at the picture. I beat Kevin in